Zoranu helped the people of Tazmurt, but they called him a criminal, and what he did afterward shocked everybody. Leaving Oruma behind, Zoranu walked to the north. The road stretched out before him, disappearing into the unknown, and he headed into it with brisk, confident strides. For days and nights, he had been walking, not stopping to take a rest because he just wasn't tired. He had rested enough in Oruma. About a fortnight after leaving Oruma, Zoranu came upon a lonely stretch of road, and from the moment he set foot there, he knew at once that something was off about the place. Wild bushes grew on both sides of the road, making him wary. He stopped walking and looked around. He stayed still, studying his environment. Then he noticed it, a slight shake of the grass blades, a shake that wasn't caused by the wind. Someone was watching him. As he turned to investigate fully, he heard a rustle behind him. He realized then that it was more than one person. From the corner of his eye, he saw a man jump out of the bush brandishing a long and thick rope, rolling it over his head. Another man jumped out with a rope as well. As Zoranu slowly turned, 3 more men jumped out of the bushes, armed with machetes and knives. Just by their filthy clothes, Zoranu knew them for who they were. They were bandits. They laid an ambush for unsuspecting travelers and robbed them of their valuables. And people who didn't have anything of value to offer were taken prisoner. That was the reason the road was abandoned. They saw at once that Zoranu had nothing valuable on him, so they decided to subdue him and take him with them. The bandit with the rope swung it high over his head and threw it skillfully at Zoranu. The rope caught on his wrist and was tied securely around it. Before he could say a word, the second bandit looped a rope around his second hand. Then, together, they pulled backward, trying to bring him to his knees, but he remained standing, not moving an inch. He then twisted his wrists and grabbed the ropes himself. He pulled back and sent them both flying. The other bandits stared at him in shock and then launched an attack on him. He ripped the ropes off his wrists as he dodged the first swipe of the machete that came his way. He then punched the bandit hard on the chest. The man flew backward and crashed into the bush. He didn't get back up. Another bandit snuck up behind Zoranu and tried to stick his knife in his back, but the blade just bounced off his skin, causing the bandit to stagger backward in shock. He had never seen such a thing before. Zoranu turned to face him, grabbed him by the neck, and flung him away. He rolled through the air and crashed hard into the ground, raising dust in the process. The last bandit was armed with a machete and a knife, swinging them at Zoranu's neck. He was fast but not very skilled. Zoranu easily caught the machete by the blade and grabbed it from the bandit's hand. He then bent the blade, making it useless. The bandit attacked again with the knife, but Zoranu punched him on the jaw, knocking him unconscious immediately. The first 2 bandits with the rope had managed to recover. They tried to fight him, but he grabbed them both by the front of their chest, holding on tight to them as he then slammed them hard against each other. Their heads connected with a resounding knock, like 2 coconuts. They both fell to the ground and didn't stand up again. Zoranu stood in the midst of the bandits, and he then continued his journey. He walked for hours, and in those hours he saw no one else, not even animals. His footsteps echoed all around, making it seem like he was the only one in the world. Just as it was getting dusk, he noticed that the lonely stretch of road was coming to an end. He could see the gates of a village. It was Kelenzi, a village on the outskirts of Tazmurt. But as he got closer, he noticed something else. Screams were coming from the village, painful and terrifying screams. He increased his speed, getting to the place in no time. He saw then that the gates of the village were wide open. They looked like they had been hit by something heavy to force them open. And as he walked through them, he saw at once who was attacking them. More bandits. They were attacking traders, threatening them at knife point and demanding money. They broke into homes, beat up the occupants, and searched for valuables. Zoranu didn't even waste any time. He went after them at once. He grabbed the first bandit closest to him and slammed his head against the wall, knocking him out immediately. This drew the attention of the others, and they came for him. They were 9 in total. They raised their spears and daggers as they attacked him. He dodged the first bandit, moving backward so that he would press forward. The bandit fell for the trick, and Zoranu punched him hard in the chest. He flew backward and slammed into a hut, cracking it heavily as he slid to the ground. He didn't get up again. The next bandit came after him, but Zoranu easily dodged his attack and gave him an uppercut. It was so powerful that the bandit was thrown up into the air, and he crashed on the thatched roof of a hut, falling through it. As he fought them, Zoranu realized something. They were not skilled fighters and relied more on numbers, so he easily beat them up. One after the other, he disarmed them and beat them up so badly that when he was done, none of them could walk straight. He kicked the last man, causing him to fall forward and land face first in the dirt. By then, the bandits had realized that he was no ordinary man. They immediately gathered themselves, helping their injured, and they ran out through the gates, disappearing down the lonely road. Once they were gone, Zoranu looked around at the destruction the bandits had caused. Slowly, the people began to step out. They looked around and saw Zoranu standing alone in the market square. But none of them looked happy. One of the traders, whose name was Kibu, demanded to know why he interfered. Kibu was weeping profusely. He added that the bandits were very vengeful people. Zoranu had beaten them up pretty badly, and they were not going to forget it so easily. They would regroup and return for their vengeance. When they did, Kelenzi would be destroyed. Zoranu asked him where their hideout was, so he could attack them before they had a chance to regroup. But no one knew. All they knew was that the bandits came at random moments, attacked and stole from them, while leaving behind nothing but tears and pain. Zoranu realized that if he left Kelenzi, he would be leaving the people at the mercy of the bandits, and he couldn't allow it. He decided to remain there until they returned for their revenge. But he wasn't just idle. He helped them rebuild their gates and their defenses. However, he knew that without a strong security force, it wouldn't hold out against the bandits when they returned. And when he was done, he stayed on the edge of the market square, away from everyone else and rarely speaking to the people. The only person he spoke to was Kibu, and he learned more about Kelenzi, the little village in the Tazmurt kingdom. Kibu told him that the bandits were a major thorn in the flesh of the people. They were so powerful that even their king, Vorin, was powerless to stop them. The people of Kelenzi had to pay huge taxes to the throne, but still they also had to deal with bandits who kept stealing from them and destroying everything that they had. Life in Kelenzi was just terrible, and even worse, it was spreading to the other villages in the kingdom. There were also reports of attacks in other parts of Tazmurt, and nothing could be done about it. Zoranu decided within himself that he was going to end the bandits' menace once and for all. And so he waited, and he waited. By the sixth day, his wait was rewarded. Just as Kibu had warned, the bandits returned with an even bigger number of men. They were led by their fearsome second-in-command named Boru, who had knives, swords, and daggers strapped to his body. From a distance, Zoranu saw them. The people of Kelenzi also saw them and immediately ran into their homes for safety. Zoranu didn't want any of them getting hurt, so he went to stand at the entrance to Kelenzi. He was not going to let them get past him. The bandits charged at him, their weapons raised high as they screamed like maniacs. Zoranu held his ground. Their blades were hitting him, but they were simply bouncing off his skin, not even leaving a mark. And because there were so many of them, Zoranu decided to finish them off as quickly as he could. So he made sure that with a single blow he could take down a bandit. And so he launched his defense, dodging their blades and swinging his muscular arms left and right. The bandits were flying into the air, some falling to the ground and not getting up. One bandit was flung hard into the gate, causing it to tremble heavily. Another was thrown so hard into the border wall of Kelenzi that it left a slight crack on the wall. It was easy to see that Zoranu had the upper hand. He was beating the bandits left and right. And soon, they were no longer attacking. They were defending against Zoranu's powerful attacks. He was now pushing them further and further away from the gates. At first, they tried to run in formation using tactics to retreat, but Zoranu was just too quick and too brutal for them. Eventually, all of them abandoned formation and ran for their lives. They were no longer interested in fighting Zoranu because they had seen that nothing they could do would hurt him. But Zoranu wasn't done with them. He chased them down the lonely road, and any bandit he caught, he made sure that he beat him seriously until the bandit couldn't stand again. He kept going. He followed them into a hidden path in the bush. They tried to scatter and confuse him, but he saw through their trick and kept pressing on them, beating them up. Eventually, he came upon the very place he was after, their hideout. It was a small shed that was only built to protect people from the harsh sunlight and heavy rain. The moment he saw it, Zoranu knew at once that this was only a temporary hideout. But the fleeing bandits had led him right to their leader, and if he took care of the leader, then Kelenzi's bandit problem would be solved. The leader of the bandits was named Soreo, and he was shocked that Zoranu had followed them that far. He was armed with multiple blades and swords, all tied to his body. He also had quick reflexes. The second he saw Zoranu, he took out a knife and threw it at him. It was so fast that Zoranu didn't have the time to dodge it. The blade slammed into his chest and bounced off, clattering on the floor of the shed. Soreo was shocked, but he remained focused as he kept throwing blades at Zoranu, who began dodging them while pressing forward. Then he caught the final one that Soreo threw, and he tossed the blade into the ground. It was buried in the ground so much that the handle couldn't be seen again. He then grabbed Soreo by the front of his chest, but Soreo pulled out yet another dagger and struck Zoranu's neck with it. He did it with so much force that the blade bent and then snapped. Zoranu frowned and punched him hard in the face, and he began to beat him up. When he was done, he dragged him by his ankle out of the bush, down the lonely road and back to Kelenzi. The people, led by Kibu, emerged from their hiding places as they watched the man who had tormented them for so many years being humiliated and defeated. He then handed the disgraced Soreo to the royal guards so he would get his just punishment. As he handed the bandit over, all the residents of Kelenzi were screaming and dancing for joy. Kibu told him that they were going to throw a party for him, but he told them not to worry. He just wanted to get on his way. They threw it anyway. Zoranu planned to use the disguise of the party to leave and resume his journey, but it began to rain heavily. It was so heavy that one couldn't even see a few steps ahead of them. The rain came with strong winds, and Zoranu knew that walking in that rain was going to slow him down. So he decided to wait it out. By the next morning, the rain had stopped, and the streets of Kelenzi were clean and fresh. Just as he was about to get on the road, he was visited by some royal guards. They were sent by King Vorin, who had invited him to the palace. Zoranu told them that he wasn't interested in seeing the king, but they insisted. They told him that Vorin wanted to personally thank him for helping them capture Soreo. Zoranu told them that he didn't have to thank him, but still the guards didn't give up. They then told him that King Vorin really needed his help, and it had to do with the fate of the Kingdom of Tazmurt. At that moment, Zoranu decided to pause. He was going to see the king and hear what other troubles he had, so he followed them. Zoranu assumed that Vorin was only just hearing of him for the first time, but he was wrong. Months before Zoranu set foot in Kelenzi, Vorin knew of him. Bled, a merchant who was a close friend of Vorin and traveled frequently through the kingdoms, had been in Oruma during its epic fall and Queen Amara's return, when she took her kingdom back from the usurper, Chief Dakin. And he knew the role that Zoranu played in everything, down to the statue that the people of Oruma had built to honor him. Bled returned to Tazmurt and told the king all about him. And when months later, word spread of a mysterious man in Kelenzi fighting off bandits and helping to rebuild the gates, Vorin and Bled had suspected that it was the same Zoranu from Oruma. And then, after he defeated the bandits at their hideouts, they knew for sure that they had the real deal in their midst. And so, Vorin sent his guards to invite him to the palace. Zoranu followed the guards there, and he saw King Vorin for the first time. He was a smallish man, but everything about him spoke of wealth and extravagance. His palace was built in gold, and the most beautiful materials were used to adorn the walls. His throne was high above the ground. Zoranu realized that Vorin was living a lavish lifestyle while his people had been suffering from bandits. He had even taxed them heavily on top of it all. But he said nothing, choosing to keep going into the palace. He was led to the banquet hall, and it turned out that Vorin had prepared a banquet for him. There was a long table filled with the best foods. Zoranu didn't touch anything, not even a drop of water. He told the king that he wasn't interested. Vorin asked him to stay for a while because they had something important to talk about. With great reluctance, Zoranu stayed. While the banquet was underway, Vorin kept trying to get him to eat or drink something, but he kept refusing. He stayed in his seat, speaking little and watching everyone with beady eyes. Then Vorin brought him gifts. He said it was to thank him for defeating Soreo. Zoranu rejected it. Vorin then doubled the gift, but that was rejected as well. At that moment, Zoranu knew that the king was heading somewhere, but he still said nothing. Eventually, Vorin said what was really on his mind. He wanted Zoranu to join his army. With someone like him on their side, they would be formidable, and no kingdom would stand a chance against them. Zoranu wasn't surprised by this request. He had expected it. He told Vorin that he wasn't interested at all. Vorin promised to give him all he could ever ask for, including a big hut in Tazmurt and a virgin for himself. All this did was show how desperate Vorin was to have him, and Zoranu wanted nothing to do with that. He told Vorin that he wasn't going to work for him. He then got up from the chair and walked out of the banquet, ready to continue on his journey. But from that point on, nothing would go according to plan. He had spent so much time at the palace that when he left, it was already dusk. He made his way back to the Kelenzi, ready to leave Tazmurt once and for all. But as he walked past the huts and sheds, he noticed that something had changed. The atmosphere and tone of the residents were different. The people who had been so happy to have him in their midst had all changed. When they saw him, they shrieked in horror and ran off in the opposite direction. Some locked their huts, as if he were a terrible omen they wanted to avoid at all costs. Zoranu found this confusing. He wondered what had changed. He continued walking until he got to Kelenzi. He found Kibu in the market square, and even Kibu seemed scared of him. Zoranu asked what had happened to make everyone act that way, and Kibu told him that everyone knew what he did and why he had pretended to be a hero. Kibu accused him of fighting off the bandits just so that he could take their place and rob them. Zoranu was shocked by this accusation, but Kibu led him to houses that had been broken into, valuables that were taken away or destroyed. There had been a raid on them all. And even worse, the people who were in the homes when the attacks happened were killed on the spot. Even the bandits had never been this brutal. Zoranu told Kibu that he didn't do any of that. He said that he spent the entire day at the king's palace. But Kibu went on to reveal that some of the stolen items were found in the market square where he had been sleeping. Kibu tells him that they don't want him anymore, and he has to leave. As Zoranu spoke to him, he could tell that Kibu was really terrified. He could also see that their minds were made up. So he gave them their wish and agreed to leave. After all, he already planned to do just that. As he walked through the dusty roads of Tazmurt, he could hear the whispers. They were harsh and cruel, but he didn't care. He simply wanted to leave. But as he kept walking, he slowed down and eventually stopped. He was thinking hard. Someone had done all those terrible things and made it look like he was responsible. That meant whoever planned it wanted the people to hate and be scared of him, which was working perfectly. And it also meant that Tazmurt was still in danger from this person. Zoranu saw that he couldn't leave just yet. He needed to find out who the culprit was. Not for himself, but for the people. He turned, ready to return to Tazmurt. He took only a few steps when he realized that he wasn't alone. There were bandits coming out of hiding places, armed with spears, swords, and arrows. And to his shock, Zoranu found out that they were still being led by Soreo, the same man that he had handed over to the guards to be punished. He must have escaped from the guards. They attacked him with everything that they had. They shot arrows at him, and all of them struck him, but they broke upon impact, falling harmlessly to the ground. Zoranu knew now that the attack on Kelenzi had been carried out by the bandits, but they set him up just to get him to leave and to turn the people against him. This made him really angry, and he stopped holding back. He fought them with all his strength, beating them so easily. Every punch he gave led to broken bones. Just one punch and the bandit couldn't get up again. He punched one bandit who flew through the air and landed hard on his back, unable to get up again. Another punch into the jaw of the next bandit knocked him unconscious immediately. The more they came, the more they were knocked down, until only Soreo was left. This time, he had way more knives strapped to his body, but Zoranu knew that it wouldn't make any difference. Soreo started attacking. Zoranu didn't even try to dodge the blades as they flew at him. They simply landed and fell to the ground while he casually approached the leader of the bandits. Soreo kept throwing more and more knives, hoping that one would actually take him down, but he was wrong. Zoranu kept approaching him, until he was too close for Soreo to throw another knife. He then grabbed him by the front of his chest, lifted him high into the air, and threw him back down on the ground. Soreo cried out in pain. He then kicked Zoranu in the face, causing him to fall backward and land on his back. Seizing an opportunity, the bandit got to his feet and ran off. Zoranu simply got up and followed him. Soreo didn't know it, but Zoranu had allowed him to land that kick, and he had also pretended to fall so Soreo could escape. That way, he would lead him to their main hideout, and maybe their real leader, because it looked like someone was controlling Soreo. If he found out who the person was, he would end everything. So he followed Soreo, and they ran through the streets of Tazmurt. Soreo could see that he was being chased, and it made him desperate. He was pushing people aside, knocking over wares. He even pushed a young lady on her way back from the stream with a calabash of water on her head. This made people notice what was happening. To them, it was like watching their two enemies fight each other. Zoranu kept following him, and they also followed at a safe distance. Zoranu stayed far away enough, giving Soreo hope that he could get away. To his shock, though, the bandit didn't run out of Tazmurt. He was running instead, deep into the kingdom, towards the center. He was going to the palace, and sure enough, Soreo ran right through the open gates of the palace, with the guards letting him through. And it suddenly made sense to Zoranu. The bandits worked for King Vorin. He was the one who coordinated their attacks and decided when and where they went. All the valuables that they took from the people went straight to the king. That was also why Soreo had been released so quickly, and the guards easily let him in. He was one of them. Zoranu was shocked at this realization. Vorin pretended to be a good king. He swore to only want what was best for his people, but he was robbing them all along while living such a lavish lifestyle. And even more horrifying, it became clear that Vorin was also the mastermind behind setting Zoranu up. He had ordered the bandits to take the lives of anyone who saw them work because survivors would know that Zoranu was innocent. This makes him even angrier. He went through the front gates. When the soldiers saw him, they hurriedly closed the gates and hit the bell to raise an alarm. But Zoranu didn't care about that. He kicked the gate hard, and it flew off its hinges, sailing into the air before crashing into a small shed, taking everything down. With a stern frown, he walked into the palace. Soldiers then attacked him, trying to subdue him. But despite his anger, he was lenient with them. They were soldiers and could only follow orders they were given, so he simply fought strategically, knocking them unconscious without inflicting any permanent damage as he had done for the bandits. This slowed him down, but it also caused a lot of commotion, drawing more crowds into the palace. Even the members of the royal council were forced to come intervene. Eventually, Zoranu caught up with Soreo and beat him silly, in front of everyone. When he finally released him, Soreo looked like he was about to give up the ghost. Zoranu let him fall to the floor. Just then, King Vorin and his merchant friend Bode arrived. At once, Soreo crawled to him and asked for help. Vorin simply looked at him in disappointment. The royal council demanded to know what was going on and why Zoranu was desecrating the palace. He then told them everything, but they refused to believe him. They just couldn't accept that King Vorin was responsible for the suffering that they faced. King Vorin, meanwhile, was denying everything. He called Zoranu a liar and a thief who only wanted to take the place of the bandits. He ordered the remaining soldiers to arrest him, but they were too scared to do anything. They had already seen what he did to Soreo and their colleagues. Zoranu then asked the royal council an important question. How was Soreo free? Who attacked the people in Kelenzi? These questions shook their resolve a little. But Zoranu knew that if he didn't get something concrete, they wouldn't believe him. Without saying anything else, he went on a rampage from room to room, tearing the palace apart. He knew that this would be the safest place for the bandits to store their loot. He was sure that only a fraction had been used to set him up, and the rest had to be somewhere. So he searched, going from room to room. People tried to stop him, but he flung them away. If a door was closed or locked, he kicked it down, sending it flying. He kept on going until he eventually found what he was looking for. A wide, spacious room that had all the loot taken during the raid. There were valuables of all kinds there. Zoranu showed the royal council, and they were shocked that indeed, their king had been their enemy all along. Seeing that his plan had been found out, Voran confessed that he was only doing it to make more money so that he could finance his army. He was planning to go to war with neighboring kingdoms, and he needed the money. The taxes he was getting weren't enough, so he used the bandits to get more from the people, and then Bode sold whatever was stolen in other kingdoms so no one could figure out their plans. Voran's plan would have been successful if Zoranu had not set foot in Tazmurt. By defeating the bandits, he had tampered with a major source of revenue for the king. He then opted to make Zoranu join the army, because that would be much better than any stolen money. But when Zoranu refused, Voran knew that he couldn't just allow him to leave. He didn't want him threatening his plans in the future, the same way he had thwarted Chief Dakins back in Oruma. This was also why he chose to set Zoranu up, because if the people hated him, they would not complain when he was arrested. This confession was made before the royal council and the people themselves. They saw that Zoranu had been innocent from the start, and they had judged him too quickly and too harshly. Voran apologized to them and swore that he would be a better king. He even promised to ban all forms of taxation, but the people had heard enough. Right there and then, he was denounced as King of Tazmurt. The crown was taken from him, and soldiers were ordered to arrest him. The people cheered Zoranu, the one man who had chosen to help them even when he didn't have to. Because without him, they would have remained at the mercy of the evil king and his bandits. Zoranu stayed around to ensure that there was a smooth transition of power. The leader of the royal council was made the new king, and his first act was to imprison Voran, Bode, and all the bandits. Some people wanted them banished, but he knew that there was a chance they would retaliate in the future, so they had to be kept close by. The new king allowed taxation to remain in place, but it was drastically reduced. Everything that Soreo had stolen during the raid was returned to its rightful owners. The king went on to ensure that soldiers were all over the kingdom, including the gates of Kelenzi, so no attack would ever go unnoticed. Another party was thrown in honor of Zoranu because this time, he didn't just fight off bandits. He also changed the entire kingdom for the better. He stayed for the party, keeping to himself as usual. But then, sometime during the heat of the party, he simply stood up and walked out. With almost everybody in the market square having a good time, there was no one else on the road. And he liked it just like that. He was happy that Tazmurt was now in safe hands, and that was all he wanted. He walked out the gates, leaving Tazmurt behind as he kept walking north. Today the world knows Superman as the greatest hero ever created. A man of impossible strength, whose skin no blade can cut, who could rule the world with a single hand if he ever chose to. But strength was never what made him Superman. What made him Superman was the day the world turned on him. The day they called him a criminal. The day they blamed him for the very destruction he had stopped. The day the people he bled for looked at him with fear in their eyes and told him to leave. And he stayed anyway. That is the part the world calls fiction. But that story was never invented in a comic book studio. It was written in the red dust of ancient Africa, in the legends of men whose strength was so great that kings tried to buy them, and when they could not be bought, tried to break them instead. Zoranu was one of those men. He walked into a village he had never seen, fought off men who had terrorized it for years, and asked for nothing in return. No gold, no land, no throne. He rebuilt their gates with his own hands and slept at the edge of their market square like a stranger. And they repaid him by calling him a thief. They accused him of the murders. They locked their doors when he passed. They told him to leave the kingdom he had just saved. And he left. He was already walking away. Then he stopped, because he understood something that most men never learn, that protecting people is not a transaction. You do not do it because they thank you. You do not do it because they love you. You do it because it is right and because if you walk away, they suffer. So he turned around and walked back into a kingdom that hated him. He tore the truth out of a corrupt king with his bare hands and handed a stolen crown back to the people who had spat his name. And when it was done, when they finally cheered him, when they finally understood, he didn't stay to enjoy it. He walked out of the gates in the middle of his own celebration and kept heading north. Because the applause was never the point. He wore no cape. He carried no symbol on his chest. He came from no distant world. He was an African man on a dusty road, with strength no blade could cut and a conscience no king could buy. Superman was never simply the invention of two writers in a small room. The blueprint was drawn in ancient Africa, in the legends of men who were feared for their power, hated for their goodness, and who protected the world anyway. And Zoranu, the strongest black man, the one who walked north when he could have ruled, he was among the truest of them. He just needed someone to finally tell his story. Now you have heard it.